On Friday, November 8th, we had the opportunity to present our alternative to political debates to a group of students at the Bliss Institute, which is the applied politics school at the University of Akron. Our candidate conversations can replace political debates by using a trained mediator and employment interview type questions that you will not find in a normal political debate. Mediators use a variety of standard guidelines in the course of their normal work. These guidelines do not permit the finger pointing and name calling we've come to expect in politics. I'd like to call in Raymond Florence, who is our Democrat, and Eric O'Neill, who is our Republican for the evening. And you have Rita Rizzo, who is playing our moderator, our mediator. See, I do it too. Okay. Oops.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Please pull up a chair and sit down.
Thank you.
We're going to have a conversation. All right. The first thing I would like you to do is for each of you to tell me a little bit about yourselves. So can you please summarize your career, including your greatest accomplishment, as well as your biggest mistake and what you learned from it? Eric, would you like to start?
Thank you, Rita. Well, my name is Eric O'Neill. I was born and raised in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., so I've been living in politics almost my entire life. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was fortunate enough, I'd say probably my biggest accomplishment, or at least something that meant the most to me, in 2012 during the presidential election, I was picked as a delegate from the state of Virginia. I was the youngest delegate at the RNC that year. To attend the Republican National Convention, and I was on Fox News and got to meet some of my heroes, people I've looked up to and have watched on TV my entire life. So that was just very surreal, and to be able to talk to them about the current state of politics was just amazing for me.
And now the sticky wicket. Can you address just what your biggest mistake may have been thus far?
Having a public Twitter account, probably.
Ah, that's a problem sometimes. Thank you, Eric. Raymond.
Well, my name is Bishop Raymond Florence. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, graduate of John Adams High School, went on to Miami University, and then after graduating, studying political science, and then going on to get my master's in divinity, I came back to Cleveland, and the reason why I came back to Cleveland was because I wanted to be involved in community centers and working with different programs in the city. Not only that, I've had the pleasure of working with the Congressional Black Caucus through Louis Stokes' office for many years, and it's been absolutely fantastic. So that's a little bit about me.
And again, your biggest challenge or mistake?
My biggest challenge, I always find that the biggest challenge is in believing that others are as sensitive to the human condition as I am. I think that has been my largest challenge. I'd like to think that everyone shares the same level of empathy and understanding, but unfortunately, that I've come across in my situations that not always being true.
Thank you. Are you ready to get started answering some questions, gentlemen?
Yes.
All right. So our first question this afternoon is about the war on drugs. Do you feel a convicted drug dealer or a violent habitual user deserves incarceration at a correctional facility, or should the person be admitted to a community rehab center? Eric.
I think, well, thank you, Rita. I think that individuals who are habitual drug users, you said violent habitual drug users, convicted drug dealers, they're breaking laws. Whatever the circumstances are, they're breaking the laws, and they should be incarcerated. Community rehab centers are a great alternative, but unfortunately, 97% of people that go to rehab go back. In fact, the average drug user goes to rehab 6 times before they are clean. And I think just if they are breaking the law, if they're especially selling drugs, they should be in prison.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Rita. To address your question, I believe that the is in the framing of the question itself is the issue, and that is, do they deserve incarceration or a perpetual imprisonment in a correctional facility? And I think the problem that we face with drug dealers, drug users, is the drugs themselves, and that the fact that drugs are they're more of a health issue, as both a medical issue as well as a mental health issue. And if we could reappropriate some of the funding that is headed towards such as the industrialized prison complex and put it more towards health and rehabilitation, I believe that 97% recidivism rate that you have when it comes to rehabilitation could be addressed, because you would be able to follow up with more community services, interfaith services, as well as bringing the full measure of the government's resources to bear.
Thank you, Bishop. And now let's ask the audience, how did they do with the question? Did you think they addressed it completely? How did you feel about the question itself? Does the question promote fairness, equality, civility in dialogue? Or would you, as the bishop here, would like to see the question stated differently?
Oh, me? I'm sorry. Yes, I do not believe that Bishop Raymond addressed the question entirely. I mean, the question says, do you feel that they should be incarcerated or not? And I don't think that you answered that clearly.
Good point. All right. Have you ever seen a politician do that before? You ask them about this talking point and they address this talking point instead. Does that trouble you at all? It does. Why do you think they do that? Anyone? He's going to give you the microphone.
A leap in logic, perhaps?
A leap in logic. Okay, so perhaps they're thinking ahead of what has been asked, or their mind takes a different track than the question itself. All right, thank you so much. Anyone else want to speak to this particular issue or the candidate's response? Okay, gentlemen, it's time for the next question. With this question, I'm going to be starting with the bishop. This one is about fossil fuels and fracking. Fracking is a process by which natural gas is harvested. Some claim that while fracking potentially harms the environment, it's our country's best clean energy solution. We have a real energy problem in this country. What is your opinion about fracking as a method of clean energy production, Bishop?
My opinion, Rita, is simple. It's not a clean method of energy production. There's nothing very clean about fracking at all. The fracking process requires drilling into the ground, and then once you've drilled into the ground, they have this chemical soup that they shoot into the ground to crack the substructure, and then that allows it to release the methane that is underneath. Now, that's dangerous to our aquifer, is dangerous in our water supply. It's actually reducing the structure of the bedrock itself, and then the chemicals themselves are carcinogenic and radioactive. So there's nothing really clean about it at all.
Thank you. Eric?
You know, it's interesting you'd say it's not clean. There's no studies to show that while chemicals are used, there's been no long-term studies to show the long-term effects of fracking. It is an effective way of getting natural gas here on American soil, which we have a lot of. It's been a great way, and fossil fuels even. creating jobs here in America on United States soil. We don't have to send anyone overseas to drill for oil. We can do it right here in America.
Thank you.
Rita, if I may, Representative O'Neill said that there's no evidence of hydraulic fracking and its history. Well, hydraulic fracking goes all the way back to the 1940s. We've been doing it for a long time. And although it was a bit different back in the 1940s and the 50s, and now what they have done is they have re-engineered hydraulic fracking to make it worse, if you can take something and make it worse. Drilling into the earth, pulling and extracting materials is always challenging. There's nothing clean about it. There have been several studies that are peer-reviewed. A simple Google search will reveal all that information.
Thank you, Bishop. Okay, let's turn to the audience. What did you think of those answers? We got an unexpected rebuttal this time.
Hi. So I don't think that you saying we have a real energy problem in this country was necessarily moderate enough, or you being the moderator. And so that's taking a stance before the question is really even asked. And I don't think that's necessarily the correct thing to do.
Okay. Do you think that that comment interjected into the question could have biased people?
Yes, I do think that it could have biased people.
Anyone else? The mic is coming your way.
I didn't like your response. I forget your name, I'm sorry.
Eric.
Eric's, because it didn't address the question. The question was about whether fracking was a method of clean energy production, and your answer was mostly about the economics of it, and not whether it's clean.
Thank you. So again, you notice some sidestepping, if you will. When a politician sidesteps a question, does it make you tend to trust that person more or less? Or it has no impact whatsoever on trust? Yeah, again. Oh, there we go.
I think that in general it makes you trust them less, but I think that the impact of it has gone down as it becomes more common, which is unfortunate.
Thank you. Good answer. We see more and more of this these days in candidate conversations, where people answer the question that they wish would have been posed instead of the question that was actually posed. Did you have another comment, ma'am? It was the same. All right. Great minds run in the same direction. Let's go on then to our next issue, which is disparaging comments and name calling. Political discourse has devolved in recent years into a flurry of name calling and false or exaggerated claims lobbed between perceived opponents. We know this kind of campaigning is annoying at best and destructive at worst. It is common for candidates running for office now to yell at each other and to attack each other. Does this tactic result in voters electing the best person to represent us? Eric.
You know, I want to start by saying that I do think this is an issue on both sides. It is 100% both sides and both parties really name calling each other. And quite frankly, I'll come out and say it. People will say, because I have conservative beliefs, that I'm a Nazi. And I think that that is just absolutely absurd to call people Nazis for having conservative beliefs. Nowadays, it has taken away the true evil meaning behind that word and what Nazis really did. And to say that I'm a racist because I have conservative views, I can sit here and have a constructive conversation with a man of color here without being racist, without being called a Nazi. I think it is absolutely a problem. I think race baiting is used to gain votes, and it's absolutely used it's yes. The current state of things is appalling.
Thank you, Eric. Bishop.
Thank you, Rita. I agree with Representative O'Neill. The current state of political discourse has divulged into a real cauldron of snakes, if you will. The main issue is that, and then the question that you asked, is this tactic better to the person would be better represented who uses this tactic? And my grandmother used to say that when you wrestle with pigs, you'll both get dirty, but only the pig is the one that likes it. So, and then when you know that, you don't want to have to get down in the dirt with folks. I think that that's one of those things that doesn't make us any better. It actually makes us worse, and it makes the discourse itself worse. I'd like to also point to the fact too that when these attacks, these verbal attacks, do take place, as Representative O'Neill says, the correlation between conservative views and the extreme, or the representative between liberal views and the extreme. Our former president, Barack Obama, was referred to as a liberal, socialist, demagoguery, antichrist Muslim from Kenya. And our current president seemed to start a lot of that and continued on. And I don't think that helped the base. I don't think it helps the American people, and I think it actually cheapens us all together.
Thank you, Bishop. Audience, did either candidate answer the question this time, since you've caught them sidestepping several times? Do you feel that the question, does this tactic result in voters electing the best person to represent us? Did that question get answered? Who'd like the mic? Just put your hand up. Ah, there you go.
I think they both sidestepped, but Eric, I feel like you almost played like the victim in your response. I liked your response, but I feel like it was still almost a sidestep to the question because it wasn't addressing electing the best person to represent us. You could have focused on like more of getting like the moderate voters, like in this past midterm election, how the Democrats like focused less on the name calling and everything to draw in the moderate voters that they needed to win. So that was their strategy. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering, excuse me, there was some rather inflammatory rhetoric that just got put out there, wasn't there? I heard the word Nazi, of course. I heard demagogue. I heard reference made to race during that, which is kind of a hot button issue for some as well. How did you feel about that content in the candidates' responses? Yes, ma'am. There's your mic.
It made me think both of you are rather bitter about current issues. Bitter with the other side specifically.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much. So, seemed like folks were fanning flames because of maybe old grudges, past experiences that they were recalling, and they brought their own perceptions and baggage even, perhaps, into the response on that particular question. All right, let's move along to the next question. This is about drone strikes and fighting ISIS with U.S. ground troops. We remain in two endless wars in the Middle East, and U.S. ground troops are ever shrinking in supply. Do we need to continue to deploy ground troops to fight terrorism, or should we confine our future efforts to primarily drone strikes? And is one approach more ethical than the other? Bishop.
To answer your first question, do we need to deploy more ground troops to fight terrorism? And the answer to that question is not necessarily as simple. It's a little bit more nuanced. Yes would be the answer, because having that human intelligence is very important, which means that we need to enable our, not just our military forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, those, our soldiers, the boots on the ground, but also our intelligence networks have to have a presence as well. And so that is going to be a factor. And when it comes to drone strikes, they are not precise as the media would like to portray, or even the U.S. military would like to portray, that the drone strikes they make mistakes. That has to deal with intel. Sometimes we have to make some interesting deals with foreign governments and foreign agents that we don't want to. And so, and to also, before I conclude, I want to also address the ethical issue. I not to sidestep the question, I don't think that it is so much an ethical issue, whether one is better or not, simply because in either case, the blowback or the ramifications from whatever our international policy is going to come back on us. So what I actually say is, in terms of ethical question, is what is our foreign policy? How are we going to address it? How do we do it in a more humane and humanitarian kind of a way?
Thank you, Bishop. Eric.
I want to start by being abundantly clear. I think absolutely, yes, we need ground troops in the Middle East. I think we need a strong military presence in the Middle East. I think, in fact, when we pulled troops, when President Obama pulled troops out of Iraq, just a week later is when ISIS came to the forefront and marched over, I think, 200 citizens to their deaths. It's something that we need to have a strong presence there to show ISIS that they will not win, that we will not back down, and they will be defeated. In fact, I mean, you talk about the ethical approach, just looking at what they are doing is they have no ethics, and we need to be strong and harsh and strict on them, and we need to stay in the Middle East. And as for drone strikes, anything to keep our troops out of a combat zone, it will save American lives, and I think that is important.
Thank you. Audience, did they answer the question this time? Are they learning from some of the feedback that you have given so far? Anyone? Oh, good. A new person.
You on the right, or on the left, you definitely answered both questions. You, however, did not answer the second ethical question, but you did answer it in a way. You didn't answer it outright. You definitely talked about the ethics, and if you read into what you said, you can see which you feel is more ethical, but you shouldn't have to read into what you say like that.
Good, thank you. I did hear Eric say the word ethics, but it was in the context of a sentence that said they have no ethics. Was that inflammatory? It seems to have been. And who was the they he was referring to? ISIS? Okay. I believe that, again, he did a little bit of a side shuffle, because we were talking about, the question was about, are drone strikes ethical? Are ground troops ethical? Is it ethical to send? And when he did mention the ethics question, it wasn't on ground troops versus drones. Did someone else have something to say? Yes, ma'am.
It wasn't really entirely clear what who you were referring to when you said they have no ethics. Did you mean ISIS or the entirety of the Middle East?
I wondered about that myself. Would you like Eric to answer that for you?
Strictly ISIS.
Okay.
All right. Okay, let's go on. I have a lot of buttons to push here. Hang on. All right. Let's talk for a few minutes before we go to the last question about how candidates can be more civil, how they can give the audience more of what they want and need in terms of information, and how they can speak with one another without disparaging one another. These two candidates have been pretty good today. I have seen candidates that have really kind of gone tooth and nail by this point in a candidate conversation or in a debate. But I have heard a number of times the other party or the other side, if you will, alluded to in rather negative tone or description. So I want to talk to you for just a couple of minutes about what would happen if our candidates today used the format called nonviolent talking skills. There are two ways that you can use it. You can use it to own your own information and responses, or you can use it to process another person's reaction to you. So if I was going to do it the first way, yeah, I did put it up there. From my perspective, I would first clearly express without blaming or criticizing what my experience is at that particular time. So, for example, when Bishop rebutted a few minutes ago, he could have started with my experience with what you just said is, or what you just said struck me in such and such a way. Did I understand this clearly? So the second thing he would do is to describe the concrete actions that he has observed or perhaps remembered from the other person in the past, or perhaps he even imagined, but he needs to state to the other person, this is what I think you said. This is what is bothersome to me. So that leads us to the next step, the reactions to what I observe from you. So you say, this is what I think you're saying or doing, and this is how it's affecting me. And then the last step from your own perspective is, this is what I need for things to be better. So, for example, the inflammatory rhetoric around the Nazis and the demagogues, if that was going to be dealt with appropriately and not used to deflect the other person, how that might have gone is after Eric said the word Nazi, John may have said, wow, that's really strong language. You know, when I hear you say Nazi, I wonder why you assign that term to people in my party and why you think that you are at risk. If you truly feel at risk of being called a Nazi, I'd like to apologize to you about that, because it's never our intention in our party to make anyone feel disparaged or less valued. Might be how he could have used that nonviolent talking skill. You can also do it from the other person's perspective and assume or try to get into the other person's mind and say, you know, I can see what you're saying. I think I understand where you're coming from. And I'd like to know a little bit more about your impression or opinion rather than to bite back at someone when you're not quite sure what they mean by what they've said. Then you seek out the concrete actions that the other person is observing that might be your contribution to the problem. So one candidate might say to another, did I say or do something that reminded or of you of something in the past or that inspired the rhetoric that you just put forth into this conversation? So you need to seek out the concrete actions and then find out how the other person reacts to what they observe or imagine. So you say, can you help me understand why you're feeling this way or why you're thinking this way? And then find out what the other person needs to change. So again, if we were going to use the Nazi and the demagogue example, Bishop may have looked at Eric after that and said something like, wow, that was a powerful word that you just used, and it seems like you're blaming it on our party. I reacted to it very strongly. It made my stomach kind of twist up when you said that thing. What do you need from me so that you can trust that I would never call you out, not even anything close to a Nazi? What do I need to say or do right now to keep this race clean and to reassure you that you are safe in a conversation with me and that I will never go there with you? And then allow the other person to answer that. So we have one final, are there questions from the audience before we go on about nonviolent talking skills? Basically, put yourself in their shoes and process what they have said, or ask for a better deal yourself if you feel that you're being put upon or disparaged or disrespected or devalued in any way. Okay, let's see how they do with that. We are going to go to, oops, one push too many, wrong button. A very hot button issue right now, which is immigration and the southern border. And this is a and we have music in the background. This is a multi-part question. So if you don't remember all parts of the questions, I would be happy to repeat them one by one after we start. Does allowing immigrants and refugees into our country make us less safe? Do immigrants take jobs away from Americans? Will a wall be effective in keeping out undocumented individuals from entering our country? And can taking children from their parents at the border be justified as an effective deterrent to keep families from seeking refuge here? Eric.
Does allowing immigrants into our country make us less safe? I would say not entirely. Not all immigrants are bad, but I think what we really need to hit on here and address is the illegal immigration that is taking place primarily on our southern border and how that is very negatively impacting our country. I think many of the people crossing over the border illegally, I'll start up. I just want to say there is a legal process to immigration, and many millions of people go through it every year. And if you are willing to break the law and not come into our country legally, just one law, then who's to say you won't break more laws? And the fact of the matter is, many illegal immigrants coming through our southern border are committing crimes. You look at the prisons in Southern California, in New Mexico, Arizona even. Around there, so many of them are gang members who are violent criminals. They're drug dealers. They are, in a sense, yes, making our country less safe. Taking jobs away from Americans. Yeah, we are struggling economically here, and quite frankly, there's not enough jobs for the citizens that are already here. So why should we allow people to come in illegally and take jobs away from American citizens, especially if they're not going to even be paying taxes? And building the wall, I think, I know that's a big hot button issue. I think it's necessary, and I think it would definitely help keeping people out, but more so sending a message that we don't just allow people to come in willy-nilly. And the fact is, what I think we need to address the issue in Mexico. It's a Mexico problem. It's not a United States problem. The United States, I mean, we have immigrants from all over the world. And as for taking children away as an effective deterrent, no one wants to see children separated from their families. The families, again, should know. And the unfortunate thing is that many of them are fleeing a far worse life in Mexico, and the Mexican government is doing nothing for its citizens. They almost expect their lower class citizens to come here to just be welcomed into the United States, and what is essentially preventing a revolution in Mexico. The upper class in Mexico just keeps getting richer while the lower class is having to leave. The Mexican cities that were thriving just 2 decades ago are now shanty towns. They're just, it's awful. I think
Thank you, Eric. Bishop.
I can answer these questions sequentially. So, does allowing immigrants and refugees in our country make us less safe? No. It does not make us less safe. It has been documented that more crimes are committed by American citizens on American citizens than any immigrants that have ever come here. I believe that of immigrant populations, it's something like 7% of any immigrant population that's ever come to the United States, overall comparative to United States citizenry. All right. Do immigrants take jobs away from Americans? Well, it depends. If you are going to go out and pick garlic in Gilroy, California, then, I suppose they will. The majority of the immigrant jobs that come here are in 2 different sectors. They're in the labor sector, the low-cost labor sector, or in the high-tech sector. And in the high-tech sector, there are special visas for these people to come over, and from Asia and from Europe, and they work in your Google, and they work in Silicon Valley and whatnot, Amazon, and then you have your low-cost wage laborers, who are the ones who work in your hotels, who take care of your lawns, who are the ones who cook most of your food. And it doesn't matter if it's Indian, Chinese, soul food, Mexican, whatever you want to call it, there's probably someone from a Latin American or a South American country, or even Mexico, as my esteemed colleague said, that is probably preparing your food. And so if you are willing to work those jobs, then yes, they are taking the jobs away from you. I think to simplify it as only being, when we talk about immigrants, as only being from the southern border, I think also creates actually a problem not for us, but for my friend Representative O'Neill, because our immigrant policy and our refugee policy are 2 different things, by the way. An immigrant is someone who is coming to this country looking for a better life. A refugee is fleeing a very unsafe and a very lethally dangerous situation in their home country. We take in, as part of international policy, several thousands of refugees every year. It's part of American policy. It's part of the great agreement with the world since the end of World War II. And so those refugees, if those refugees, for example, were not accepted, if we did not accept the Jewish refugees after World War II, they would have died. And if we had not accepted refugees from from Iran, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, refugees from sub-Saharan Africa. The list goes on, from different parts of the world. Then those people would suffer in their homes. They are fighting an uphill battle. So a wall. No, the wall simply will not keep undocumented immigrants from coming into the country at all. Most undocumented immigrants actually enter through legal ports. They don't just cross over some fence or swim their way through the Rio Grande, as the modern legend would like you to have you believe, the narrative. Most people get here coming through ports of entry. And also, to speak of the wall, we're not talking about making a wall between U.S. and Canada, by the way, if you notice that. We're talking about making a wall on our southern border, which I think has more to do with a certain disposition towards people who live towards the south than towards the north. By the way, a few of the 9/11 attackers came in through Canada, not through Mexico. And then lastly, taking children away from their parents, never right. Never right, unless it's not in terms of the immigrant. Let me be very specific when I say in terms of the immigrant population, because it's not going to be an effective deterrent. And in fact, the court system that we have set up is terrible. You have someone go in and ask for a 2-year-old to say their name, and then say, well, they're not here. So they don't have representation. And if they are refugees, then they are actually being denied what we as Americans have decided is part of our law, is part of how we will treat those who come here seeking asylum. That is actually the legal way to come into the country if you are seeking asylum. Now, and I'm sure we will get to this, part of the problem that we have is that if you have an administration that decides you're not going to have the opportunity, we're going to turn you away at the border, we're going to stop you from coming, and basically siphoning down your legal options to legally enter the country, then yes, you're going to create more caravan situations.
First of all, the question, and thank you for your response, but the question was specific to our southern border, and I don't like that you alluded to policies such as building a wall, which I believe would be effective, as being racist policies.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Did I use the term racist?
No, you didn't. You alluded to it. It was a very clear allusion.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you, that I did not
You
say...
said there was a somewhat clear disposition towards people from southern countries. And
Yes.
Whether that has to do with race or not, I think race truly has nothing to do with it. It's an economic thing. We put up the wall. I mean, really, we should be helping Mexico be a stronger country. There's no reason. It would benefit all of us. And yeah, we're not putting a wall in the north. Canada is a strong country and fairly independent. We don't have problems, or as many, with illegal Canadian immigrants. You just don't see it. It's not happening. You don't have caravans coming down from way up in Canada through our northern wall. You can laugh at me, but it's a fact.
Well, to be fair, there's nothing north of Canada, so that's, if you'll excuse me, there's nothing that, there is no, and the last land bridge that came across from Alaska, that melted a long time ago. But, so we're not having people come from the north to come down that way.
Okay,
no.
yeah, you're right. So we don't need a wall in the north. Thank you for arguing my point, Bishop. The fact is, we do need a wall in the south, and we need to help Mexico be a stronger country. It would make trade, having a country that we could trade with, more independent, more stable, not having to have their lower class rely on seeking refuge in a country that can barely take care of most of its own citizens. We have such a problem here in the United States with American citizens who are struggling to find jobs, who are struggling to take care of themselves, that we don't have the resources to be providing refuge to the many, many illegal immigrants coming through our southern border. And the fact of the matter is, there is a law in place to come into this country legally, and they should be law-abiding citizens if they chose so.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. There is a law in place. It is the law that grants people who are looking for asylum, if they are asylum seekers, that they are granted permission to come to our country. That law is in place. Now, what I'm going to ask you, are you arguing, just so that I understand, just so that I'm clear, are you arguing that the law itself should be taken away? That is a bedrock of
Absolutely not.
our American system, that you should not
I
grant
did not
asylum?
say that.
Okay,
Absolutely
I just
not.
want to make sure that that's not what you're saying.
That's-
Thank you, gentlemen. Audience, did they do anything to use the nonviolent talking skills that we spoke about? This is an easy question. You can all go. Or.
I mean,
Either way.
a little, but I'm gonna say when you made the sweeping generalization about the minority populations, that they're criminals, that they're making, like, that immediately turned me off to your argument. Like, I'm not gonna listen to you after that, because you can't make sweeping generalizations about groups of minorities and expect me to take you seriously, honestly, because these are individual people. And then you just didn't acknowledge extenuating circumstances as to why they make up a majority of the criminal population. I mean, the whole stop and frisk thing is something that happens. So, like, to make a generalization about that and then to not acknowledge the extenuating circumstances that also surround and also attribute to the population, I'm not going to listen to you after that.
All right, very good. Thank you. We have another person. Mike is coming your way. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Eric. If you wish to allocate funds to help Mexico build up its country and reduce the desire among the Mexican population to leave their country, why build the wall in the first place and instead allocate the wall funds that would be for the wall and instead send it to developing Mexico?
Well, as comical as it may sound, as our president has stated, Mexico has the funding. We don't have to allocate our national budget to build the wall. Mexico should pay for it. In fact, their government is so corrupt that their top 50% of citizens, top 10% of citizens are living better than the bottom 90%. That is why they are fleeing here. They have a corruption problem. Their government is essentially run by the cartels and by drug dealers. They have, I mean, on a regular basis, mayors and governors or local politicians being assassinated by the cartels for trying to do anything to make the situation better.
So the cartels should pay for it?
The Mexican government should pay for it.
All right.
Okay. This seems to be an issue where these two gentlemen have absolutely no common ground. Is there common ground on the immigration debate? Can we have a more civilized dialogue around it? Could we entertain one another's perspectives in such a way that it would result in mutual problem solving instead of racially tinged allegations? The mic is being delivered. And then next, Ryan, this gentleman. Okay.
Yes, there is a way to do it. And the way to do it is to remember that these are people, that these are human beings that have their own lives. I think a lot of times that gets left out of the conversation. We kind of group them together and make them the other, make them the they. And you have to sit and realize, like, imagine that's like your family member, because that is a situation. Like, you have to humanize these people, and I think the dehumanization is what pushes both sides away from each other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was a great contribution. This gentleman over here, and then the woman in the middle.
I think I've said this before earlier, but I think that many times the way that you have phrased questions has been biased. So for the last the question before this, you said if the war was like never ending. I don't know if that was specifically it, but like
Endless war, yes.
yeah, endless war. So like that's basically just biasing the listeners because you're supposed to be the moderator. You're supposed to be the moderate point of view. And I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think that you need to have a moderate opinion if you're going to be the moderator, and I think that you guys need to look at that more.
Absolutely. Okay. So sometimes just simply the way the person poses the question biases the question to the point that we can't really get a balanced discussion from it. So descriptors such as endless war, I'm looking to see if there are any loaded words in this particular question, and I don't think so, unless we're talking about the words effective deterrent could be even misappropriated from that sentence to say, you know, is this going to keep the people out that we don't want here? So in order to have more civilized candidate conversations, we should make sure that the questions that are being offered are as middle of the road, as unbiasing, and as equitable as possible so that we're not slanting towards anyone's position. Ma'am, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, but it was about before the question about finding middle ground on immigration. I say this not because I'm not a Republican, but I think because it has become so polarized, it would be hard to see the Republican Party come back from being so on the right of immigration. Because I feel whenever a candidate responds to questions like that, it's like a checklist, like you mark off, they're taking jobs away, we need the wall, that I don't see a way to reconcile the differences in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Each side does have their well-established talking points, don't they? And they're the go-to for each candidate. If your mind goes blank, you've always got those 2 or 3 talking points to go to. Talking points are used to drive home not just a thought, but an image, if you will. So, for example, on the southern border, we've got, anytime you hear tearing children away from their families, that conjures up an entire image in your mind, doesn't it? And then you hear some of the opposite talking points. These people are criminals. There are 300 rough, tough guys in the caravan that's coming up now. And think about how many times you hear those. So it gets embedded in our thinking, in our imagery, in our perceptions of what's going on. And I agree with you. I think that as long as we continue to repeat the same rhetoric, that we're going to continue to talk from different camps. Bishop, did you want to say something else?
If I may, the person in the back with the glasses, when referencing the question, what we're talking about in essence is conflating issues that really are not necessarily related, as well as conflating, for example, generalizations that are not necessarily, the conclusion doesn't necessarily lead to that. For example, by conflating immigrants with refugees, you create an issue. And this is what I wanted to say in my answer, is that there's a difference between immigrants and refugees. And when you address immigration, then you're addressing people who are coming here looking for opportunities, for themselves and their families, perhaps, because, as it's said, we have the greatest nation in the world. We hear that all the time. And then refugees who are seeking safety from impending danger is completely different. I mean, right now you have people walking thousands of miles. Not taking buses, not trains, but walking thousands of miles just for the opportunity, for the chance for asylum. And that's what refugees are. So the questions together actually conflates the issue. The same thing with Representative O'Neill saying, you know, conservative issues do not necessarily mean that they are a Nazi. Well, no, they don't. Just like liberal issues doesn't necessarily mean that you are a bearded Marxist who is looking to steal all of the capital and make everyone stand in bread lines. You know, going to the extremes is what makes things, I think, challenging, going back to the point. And so if you would not conflate conservative with Nazi unless you had someone, for example, who had a banner or using code words that are racist or classist, or insert whichever adjective you'd like. That's just a thing I'd like to add to that whole question, because I
Gentlemen,
do see it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do hear some common ground. I do hear some overlapping interest here. You both have safety concerns, and you both have safety concerns for human beings. Sometimes it's a different group of human beings that you're talking about, but you all seem to value sanctity of human life and safety. Is there anything that you would like to say to each other that would help you capitalize on that common ground experience?
Yeah, Bishop, I appreciate what you did just say, and I think you're right. Going to extremes on either side is not beneficial for anybody. And being able to find some common ground, at the end of the day, we both want what's best for America. And I think we both care about helping people. And I think that is something that we can see eye to eye on.
I agree, 100%. We have had examples politically of great political leaders coming together and actually saying to their constituents. I always think of John McCain, when the woman who came to him and said he's a Muslim, and he said no, he's a good, honest American. I know he is, and putting that kind of rhetoric down, and that came from the front runner of the Republican Party at the time. Or you go back to Bob Dole when he was running against Bill Clinton, and he said that this man may be my adversary politically, but he is not my enemy because he is an American. And I think as Americans, we can come together and be concerned about safety and about others, and I completely would be happy to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Lou, would you like to make any final closing remarks?
What did you guys think of the whole thing at this point? Any thoughts? Overwhelmed?
I am curious to hear what this young gentleman right here has to say. I can see the wheels are turning, and I've been waiting for you to. Been waiting for you to take the microphone.
No. You gotta help us out.
Yes, and the person next to you.
Well, I simply think that this was a pretty good example of what you probably shouldn't do in some cases in debates. And it was a good experience to learn what you should do in a debate to make sure that you're not turning away your audience, to make sure that they're actually listening to you, and B, that you get your point across without actually being offensive to any particular group, no matter what the issue is, and making sure that that both sides are heard equally in the sense of being, I guess, in a way to put it simply, kind to each other.
Yeah, I like it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And sir?
Yeah, I think it's been a good opportunity to see how the words that we choose and the way that we orient our thoughts can kind of compound exponentially after they come out of our mouths, and it's just kind of an opportunity to go back to that old adage of kind of think before you speak, and sort of get the chance to see how different ways of wording things, simply, just by omitting adjectives that make things appear conflated or that add hyperbole to a situation, that removing that can allow you to look at things more objectively. And in the end, that helps people be better speakers with each other.
Absolutely. We can talk all day, but what's really the point of a conversation? Isn't it to inspire understanding? It's both information transmission and thought transmission. So we're trying to understand one another's thinking. And it's only when we can do that that we can begin to find those overlapping interests, that common ground, where we can begin a constructive and productive means of working with one another. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of you, and I hope, like I said, there's a lot more to what I'm trying to do as far as information, and there's even more to do for the country. And since I'm older than you are, all I can do is tell you how it works. And that's what we've been doing. But it's up to you, and I've heard this said from people at the RNC that I was sort of involved in, that you got to figure out a way that people can reach their common ground. For me, that's Abraham Maslow. That's that thing in the brochure, the pyramid. And we've got more information on how our brains work. And I don't know if you're aware, and I don't know if I should be telling anybody either, there's a group of us here at the university and from other places too that are trying to figure out how to make some kind of civility center so that we can have people come and learn how not to hate each other. And it's interesting. We've been doing this for about a year, on and off. It started with 4 of us, and then we've added some people. It's a real serious problem we have, that we could go into some other time. But you guys have a different attitude, and I hope you retain it when you start getting out into the real world and, feel the pressures. We've all got to figure out a way to work together. And there's a lot of stuff going on. And what I'm doing as part of Better Outcomes is I'm going to start a war between millennials and baby boomers and see if they can figure out how to get along. But seriously, it's something that we all have to try and do together. And I appreciate you guys coming today. If you want to stick around, we can talk, a little bit more. And for Better Outcomes, if you would tell your friends and point them at my website, this video will be up hopefully by the end of next week. And I hope it generates a lot of questions from other people who aren't here, but in my mind, it's always preferable to be with people so, you can talk to them, you can see their faces. If their skin starts turning red or some other color, you've stuck your foot in your mouth or something. And, it's going to be a big job. That's it.
Thank you.
I would like to thank the Bliss Institute, and particularly Acting Dean David Cohn, for his cooperation and permission to present what we think of as the future of political discourse. As you can see, the students, when provided with a different context than we are used to, spotted the rhetorical manipulations that politicians use to trick voters into choosing them as their candidates. We believe that the point of intersection between voters and candidates during the campaign is the place to start looking for statesmen. people who understand that they are the employees of the voters and their responsibility is to the people in their districts. I've been working on this project for quite some time, and I believe that our approach is the only way to break the stranglehold that our major parties hold on the election system. If better outcomes is to succeed, those of us who are dissatisfied with the system and who understand that it will not fix itself must take peaceful action before the next election. If we do not, I fear that what we have seen thus far will only escalate, causing much bigger problems in the future. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I appreciate your time and attention. I hope that we have given you a better understanding of what we think can make real change possible in the future.